محمد وعجل فرجه. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome in this blessed night that is blessed by the light of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family. This night is the night of his birth. It is a very blessed night, and I wish and hope that God showers you all with his blessings, the blessings also of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family. Today, for a change, I actually sent out a message so that if anyone would have any questions regarding the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he would forward them, and I would be answering them tonight one by one. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. They are actually written in Arabic mostly, so I'll have to translate as I go. The first question was that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had fought the Battle of Badr. And there he had fought people that were unarmed. So what does Islam say about that? Basically, the Battle of Badr is one of the greatest battles in Islam. I will talk about its history very briefly so that there'll be a chance to answer all the questions, hopefully. So, to begin with, the Battle of Badr, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his whole army were only 313 men, exactly. Whilst the army that is against them was actually 1,000 people strong. So they were more than double, actually triple the amount of Muslims. This battle occurred approximately the 13th of March at 624 or 26, 624, yes, Anno Domini. So it was the second Hijri year. And this battle was very carefully planned. Before this battle, heathens and people who actually refused the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his message, were always attacking Muslims. They actually had them in a siege, and I have talked about this before, for 4 years. And, they prevented them all the services that they would need. They cut water, they prevented them from going and getting any commodities that they would need, to the extent that when Khadija bint Khuwaylid, peace be upon her, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, she was going to give birth to a Sayyidah Zahra, Fatima bint Muhammad, alayha salam. And when she was needing, the midwives, the doulas to come and aid her and help her, nobody agreed to go. And all the people of Quraysh, they planned carefully to prevent any woman from going and helping Khadija. Childbirth at that time is not like now. It was a very dangerous issue, and more often than not, the ladies that were giving birth would actually have some complications, and that would lead eventually to either death or something very close to it. So help is very much needed, and they used to make, at the time of the Prophet, teams, like small teams, 4 to 5 to 6 ladies that would come and aid the lady that is giving birth. So even to this extent, they did not have the humanity to aid a woman that is on the brink of death because of her childbirth. Anyways, so they actually fought Muslims, and Muslims were very few at that time. They fought them several times. They attacked them, they stole from them, they kicked them out of their houses, they kicked them out of even the cities that they resided in. But each and every time any Muslim came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, telling him, "Oh Muhammad, we want to retaliate, we want to fight them back, we want to do something," and he would always say, "No, abide by peace until God gives the permission." And indeed, God gave the permission later on to fight the mushriks or the heathens. So the verse, the Quranic verse in which it gave that permission was أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. That God has given the permission for those that have suffered under tyranny and injustice to fight back, and God is able to aid them to victory. As I said, in Badr, they were only 313, and that is when the Quranic verse came and gave permission for them to fight back. What happened is, Badr is a place that is actually not in Mecca, neither in Medina. It is in midway between both. So if you're looking from Medina's perspective, it would be southwest, approximately 153, 52 kilometers away. And this route was actually the route that the caravans that were going from Medina and Mecca meet, so that they would go to the Levant and they would go to other places to practice trade. And this caravan, the one that the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his army went and conflicted, they actually were not much. They were maybe, let's say, 200 people. That's it. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, was actually sending messages to them. So he told them that I am going to attack if you're not going to return back to the place that you came from. Return to Mecca or else we will attack. So the Prophet actually did not attack them and ambush them while they were unarmed. No, he waited for them. This battle actually occurred in Ramadan. It occurred in the 17th of Ramadan. The Prophet moved out with his army in the 12th or the 13th. And when he almost met them, he also sent them another message telling them that we are going to attack unless you return. So imagine between the 12th and the 17th, how many people they could gather. Abu Sufyan was actually the leader of the caravan of Quraysh that was going to the Levant. And he called upon all the ringleaders that were in Medina and Mecca to come and aid him. So they went from approximately 200 men into 1,000 men, and most of them were armed. So this is the first issue I had with this question. The question asked, how did the Prophet attack people that are unarmed? No, they were severely armed, and they were actually more armed than the army that the Prophet, peace be upon him, has brought. Especially, don't forget that the Prophet's army did not have any resources. Even some narrations mention that many of them fought with sticks and stones. Imagine, you're going to a war and you're fighting people that have horses and that have spears and have excessive armor and have swords and daggers and arrows and whatever, and you're fighting them with sticks basically. Only a few of them afforded and had some real arms on them. That is from the Prophet army's part. The other part, as I said, no, they had many capabilities. They had the monetary ability. They had the tactical and strategic also advantage, and they had the advantage of numbers also. So before the Prophet attacked, he gave them many ultimatums. If you continue, we would attack. If you return, we will leave you be. And I remind you again, this caravan was also filled with merchandise. So the Prophet told them, you can keep whatever you want, but don't go. Why? Now that's a question connected to this question. Why did the Prophet actually want to attack this caravan? Why this caravan, not another one? The answer to that is simple. First of all, this caravan was the first to go out to the Levant at the time that God's permission went to Muslims that they are able to fight back after years of suffering tyranny, waiting for others to convert into Islam or to at least have a ceasefire or have a discourse in order to have, just a small dialogue and fix things without any war. But that did not happen, and the permission came, and it was the first caravan leaving. That is number one. The other thing is that this caravan has the money and the merchandise of the merchants of Quraysh, the top leaders. We are talking about Abu Lahab, the uncle of the Prophet. We are talking about Abu Sufyan, which actually controlled, everything that was going around at that era almost. So, if they would go through with their merchandise, they would get more funds, they would get more capability in order to fight Islam. So the whole issue was that we don't want them to gain more power to fight Islam with. they were able to keep, they were able, to keep all of their funds and their merchandise if they returned, and they had the chance to. And the Prophet kept the route between them and their homes open. He told all of his army men, do not go and fight anybody that is returning back home. You are able only to fight people that would stay. And so the Prophet, peace be upon him, went and attacked later on after giving these ultimatums. And this was one of the most difficult wars that he has fought because of the sheer difference in numbers. So for each one Muslim, you would have 3 times the amount of people. So imagine how much people that would be needed in order to control the disadvantage that they had. But they had only the power of faith, and that is what they used. And they fought. Muslims only lost about 14 people, but they lost many important people. For example, Hamza, he was martyred at that time. And he actually was disemboweled, and his liver was taken, and Hind ate part of his liver as a revenge. Harbi was the person that killed Hamza by order of Hind. Anyways, so when we talk about the other army, there were 70 casualties and 70 people that were under arrest, and the rest fled. They could not keep up. So this is the answer to the first question, which was asking about Badr and how the Prophet, peace be upon him, attacked, and was he attacking them unarmed or not. I would add a final thing. There is something very splendorous about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that you would not see in any leader of the same era, even from an era after the Prophet. Let's talk even 600 years after the Prophet. There was no one like him. He told them, do not attack anybody that is unarmed. Do not kill those that are casualties but not dead. And also, number 3, try as much as you can to kill from the first hit. Don't torture the people that are in front of you. And many other recommendations, but these top 3 are very important because he has given a system of war that is unprecedented. No civilians were harmed, nobody was thrown out of his house and whatever. Even when the Prophet, peace be upon him, returned into Mecca and he had all of Mecca under his control, he told them that peace be upon everybody that is in Mecca. And we have to have a solid agreement between us and them. No Muslim shall contradict this agreement that is going to be made. So this goes for the first question. The second one, why was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the final prophet and nobody else? See, as Shiites, we believe that there are many worlds that a person would go through. There is first Alam al-Dhar, and then there is Alam al-Aslab, then Alam al-Arham, and then this earth, and then Alam al-Barzakh, and then the thereafter. So basically, these worlds are all different and have different rules. So in Alam al-Dhar, it was decided who would be, for example, Muslim, who would be non-Muslim, who would be a good person, who won't, who would be generous and not, based on actions we have done there, but we have forgotten. So it is like when you move from one world to another, you forget everything from the previous world. So based on the actions, and we have narrations to aid that people had an examination there, and whoever was pious person over there would be pious here. Even if he goes through some obstacles, you may see some people that are born, for example, into atheism, but then they grow up and they become Christians, Jews, Muslims, whatever. But it was written from that world, based on their actions there, what would happen, who would be poor, who would be rich. So everything that we have in this world is not haphazardly given out, no. It is given out per some, the different actions that we had in these worlds. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the first one, per the narrations, to believe in God at that time, at Alam al-Dhar. So he deserved to be the final prophet, the prophet that would seal all prophets and that would seal all the messages of God and complete everything, the plan of God that is going to be on this world. So everything, not only why the Prophet became the Prophet, everything that is in this world is decided from there. So there is something else that I need to speak about that is very interlinked with this issue, which is, do we as Muslims believe that everyone controls his fate, or that everything happens without a reason or for a reason? What is exactly our ideology as Shiites? The answer is, we don't believe that there is a set plan in our lives that we will follow through. Neither do we believe that we have full freedom of will. It is something between both. As Imam Sadiq said, Amrun bayna amrayn, something in between both. So there are some things that are set in your life as fate, and many of them were decided in Alam al-Dhar, the previous world, the world of Dhar. And in there, Dhar, actually in Arabic, I forgot to mention, is something that is minute and small. So we call small ants Dhar. We also call small granules of sand or sugar or salt, whatever, we call them also Dhar. That is in Old Arabic. Now we use several different names, but basically it returns to the same thing. So it is the small world, if you want to translate it fully into English. So we have fate, but it is not fully decided in all of its areas. No, it depends on what we do. I'll give an example from a narration. There was a person that came to one of the infallibles and was asking him some questions. So that Imam or that infallible, it may be the Prophet also, I forgot, but he said that you would only live for a set period of time. So go enjoy your life and try to be good to the people around you. So this person was actually very saddened by this news, but still he tried to improve his life to the better, and he did. And when the date came, he slept, but yet he woke up again, and he was astonished that how would an infallible tell me something and then it would not be true. And he went to that infallible and told him what has happened. And he said that you have performed sadaqah, zakat. You have given the poor people from your money, and God has decided to give you extra years. So fate could be manipulated by the actions, whether good or bad, that we do in this world. So that should answer the second question. The third question, is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, illiterate or not? See, this is an issue of high controversy in the Islamic world. Sunnis are also split into two schools of thought when it comes to this issue. Shiites also. But let's talk about the Shiite side and what they say. See, there are several pieces of evidence that you could compile to say that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was illiterate. هو الذي بعث في الأميين, this is in Surah Al-Jum'ah, رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته. So he, God, has sent from the illiterate people one person from amongst them. That is one translation of the Quran, that the word al-ummiyin means the illiterate people. But there is another translation which says that ummiyin is actually people of Mecca. How does ummiyin turn into people of Mecca? We in Arabic have something called naht, which means sculpting language. So we take a long name and we cut through it so that it would be shorter. It would be like a nickname. I'll give an example. There is a family called Abd Qais, a very important family. And when people would call them, they would not say, for example, oh, Hassan from Abd Qais. It's so long. They would say Hassan al-Abqasi. See how they could cut through the name and then find something, a shorter version. And also, not only Abqasi, they even shortened it more and said Abdi. So, Al-Abdi, he is from Abd Qais. They use only the first part of the name, not the end of the name. Mecca was called Ummul Qura. So, if you would cut this name in half, you would see that it splits into which means mother, and Qura, which means villages, the mother of all villages. So if you would actually point out to the Prophet and say that he is a prophet from Mecca, you could say he is al-Nabi al-Ummi from al-Qura. So there are two ways of translating. Not only in this instance, in many instances of the Quran, it was mentioned, An-Nabiyyul Ummi, etc. And the same goes for all. There is nothing definitive. But most commonly now, the common belief within the Shiite school of thought is that they believe that Al-Ummi does not mean that he was illiterate, rather that he was from Al-Qura, from Mecca. But there are still some very high scholars and even some sources of emulation, Maraja' Idam, that they believe that he was illiterate. There is something to be said about this actually, before I move on to the other question. It is very important also. Even if we said that the Prophet is illiterate, that does not mean that this is a bad influence on his character, or that, for example, this diminishes his level as a prophet. Why? Because the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was very difficult. He did not grow up with a mother, neither a father. Both of them died while he was very young. Actually, his father passed away before he was even born. And he had to actually work day and night. There are some descriptions of what the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to do. He used to tend to cattle, and that took a lot of time. Even not his own, other people's cattle. He used to carry merchandise and move from one place to another. He used to go with the merchandise caravans, and there he met Khadija, peace be upon her, his to-be wife. And day and night he had no time to rest. In Mecca and Medina, there were only about 20 people that could read and write. And they were very busy also, everybody had his own livelihood. There was nobody at that time period, nobody that had the lavish lifestyle of just sitting around and just having money pour over him, except for the merchants. And many of the merchants did not know how to read and write. These people that knew had many professions that they used to do, and they were very preoccupied. So in between all of that, the Prophet did not have, peace be upon him, any chance to go and learn. If a person has a chance to learn and does not, then you would say that this is a bad attribute of him. But if he could not have a chance to do so, and then finally he is revealed as a person that is illiterate, then he did not have any let's say, way of getting out of the situation that he was in. You would see people until this day and age, they are illiterate, but they can't go and learn. From a very young age, people in many countries, they would be child labor, and they would go at a young age of 8 or 9 and go work, clean shoes, clean fish, whatever. They would do that until they grow up. We cannot say that, oh, you need to learn, and oh, you actually are illiterate, and that is a bad attribute. It is something that they could not control. So anyways, this as an issue is not a great deal in Islam. So it doesn't matter whether he was literate or illiterate, it is all the same difference. Let's move on to another question. It says, question number 4, how many daughters did the Prophet, peace be upon him, have? This is also a point of conflict within Muslims. As Shiites, we believe that he only had Fatima al-Zahra, peace be upon her, and he had Ibrahim, which is a male child that died at the age of 4. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, went to the funeral and said some very memorable words. Anyways, so what about Ruqayya? What about Kulthum? What about the other daughters attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him? The scholars, Shiite scholars, say that most likely that they are actually his daughters-in-law. Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, married many women, and many women that he married were married before and had children. So he considered them as his own. And this is the way that it goes in Islam. If you marry a spouse and that spouse has children, then they become yours. They become your children. You don't give them your name, they still retain the name of the original father, but they are considered as your children without any difference. So, as Shiites, we believe that Fatima al-Zahra, peace be upon her, and Ibrahim are the children of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And some people may ask a question that is very similar to this one, or connected, let's say, at least, which is why, when he had so many wives, Did he, not have this many children? He had only a few. He was content with a few. The answer to that is the Prophet, peace be upon him, marrying this much women was for a reason. The people of Mecca and Al-Medina were very split. What he did is that he married one woman from each of the great families and he kept them together. And so he joined all of the people around him. This was the way that he has done. Some people say, no, he wanted to marry a lot of women. And if he wanted to marry a lot of women, he would have the chance to do so. Nobody would contest. And also, if you look at the wives that he took in, actually most of them were married and they are not youth. Most of the ladies that he had married. So if he wanted to marry out of only the want to marry, he would marry young ladies, not old ladies, and not ladies with children. That is for certain. So all of his life, it was very apparent that the marriage that he has done was by the order of God and to abide by what God wanted and planned. There is a question that is very related to this one, which said, how would he marry some of his wives as children? I'll refine this question. There are some wives, for example, Aisha, that he married at a very young age, before adolescence. So what does Islam say about that? There is a clear ruling about Islam. First of all, one could not have the full benefit of the marriage. I don't want to say the explicit wordings. One could not consummate the marriage if the other party does not go through adulthood. He is not an adult yet. So Islam, from that age, believes in that. If you look at other civilizations, East and West, everywhere, when they come to marrying children, no, they would marry children and consummate the marriage fully without any problem at all. They would brag about that. But Islam came and changed that actually. He gave an age for marriage, a due age for marriage. So before that age, nobody could actually consummate the marriage. They could get married, but it is just something, let's say, a formality. Okay, so if it's a formality, why would the Prophet do it? Because it had some achievement to be gained from it. So marriage in Islam, it's not just an activity in order to gain access to intercourse. No, it is actually something that has many benefits and goals, and you could choose whichever one that suits you and suits the other party. The other party has a say. In Islam, if you want to marry a person and then you go to him and he disagrees, you cannot force him. If you force him to marry, then the marriage is void and the children that you would have are illegitimate children. This is very important about Islam. I don't think any other religion says the same when it comes to marriage, when it comes to forcing people into marriage. But I would have to do some more research before I am more certain about this. Anyways, so this was the question, how could he marry Aisha while she was a child? He married her, but there was no consummation of the marriage. And basically, Aisha was a very important person to marry because of the family that she had behind her in order to gather all sects into Islam. Another question, why was the Prophet called the Sadiq al-Amin, which is the truthful one and the one that you could entrust? I have talked just earlier that he has done many chores and many jobs within his life. So within all the jobs that he has done, he never stole, he never lied, he was sincere, he was clear, and everybody was very, very comfortable dealing with him. To the extent that Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the wife-to-be of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and her, actually used to give him all access to all of her money and also all of the merchandise that she had, and she knew that he would actually treat them fairly and would only go through with certain activities that would improve her wealth and not decrease it. So that is why he was called As-Sadiq al-Amin even before he became a prophet. The other question, the seventh one, what was the occupation of the Prophet, peace be upon him? I think I answered that through the previous questions, but I'll remind the person who asked this question with the answer. He predominantly tended to cattle, not only his own, but the cattle that is from the people of Mecca generally. And he used to take care of merchandise and travel with caravans, taking the merchandise and then reselling and whatever. So he used to do these small jobs. A question that is a very important question, actually. I should put this first. What did the Prophet, peace be upon him, establish within human rights? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, established many things when it comes to human rights. There are some rights that were non-existent before he came. I've talked before about the rights of women in Islam and how Islam improved them. Let's talk about that and other areas also. So, before Islam, whenever a person died and left an inheritance, ladies and women would not inherit anything at all. Nothing, zero. They would take nothing. And also, there was something that is called Wa'd al-Banat. Predominantly Eastern cultures, I'm not talking not only about Arabs, no. Generally Eastern cultures, even if you go to the Far East, you would see the same thing. They would prefer male children rather than female children. For many reasons, including that they care a lot about the virginity thing, that we need to keep her as a virgin until she marries, and if she does not, she has to be killed. This was in all the East, the Far East, it was the same. So, basically, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, at that time, when he came, people were like this. They would kill any newborn ladies that were brought into this world before they grow up. So you had actually a leeway of, let's say, a full year to see if you enjoy having a daughter or not. If you don't, then you can just marry her. That was the way that people used to act before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Also, there was extreme nudity, even around the Kaaba. The Kaaba was not built by Muslims, it was built by Ibrahim al-Khalil, the ancestor of Jesus alayhi salam, Moses alayhi salam, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, the common ancestor. So, when we look at Abraham or Ibrahim, he was the one to build it. And then, after his time, many people turned back into pagans or heathens, and they used to put their statues, their idols in the Kaaba, basically. It was a storehouse, and they would go around the Kaaba fully nude. You were not allowed to go there carrying a weapon or carrying an article of clothes if you want to go around the Kaaba before the Prophet, peace be upon him. And in many instances, people would share their wives also, and they will share their daughters, and they will exchange them for commodities and whatever. So they were treated like a commodity. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came and said, no, you would have to give them inheritance. You would have to keep them also modest. You would have to give them rights. You're not allowed to kill them. You're not allowed to treat them in a very bad manner. Until he had said, Al-mar'atu rayhana wa laysat biqahramana. A lady is a flower and not a solid stone. And so, many narrations he has given, and the full and final revelation of the Prophet regarding human rights when it comes to women is that they have the same responsibilities as men, as Muslims. They have to pray, they have to do, etc. And they have a certain role in life that they would do, and they would be rewarded as equally, even not equally, even more than men, because they go through many hardships. Even the hijab, it is not something very easy to abide by. For me, I'm talking as a person, whenever I want to leave outside, for example, I'd have to wear this full turban and, the whole situation that is here. And it is very difficult in Bahrain. I can't imagine how a lady, would suffer from the heat and excessive humidity wearing all these articles of clothes. And this is something that is very powerful, a powerful message that they give, that they actually stick and abide by their religion, even if it is difficult or more difficult to them than it is to men. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this question in order to go to the rest of the questions, but Islam came and gave many regulations towards human life, even in war, as I said earlier, that it gave many regulations in order to have the war that is most humane. Because every civilization and every religion, it did not go through the whole course of its existence without having any struggle and any military event that is happening, and Islam is no different. So this is the answer to the 7th question. The 9th question, what did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, eat? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to eat the food that was commonly there in the Arabic Peninsula. So he ate a lot of dates, a lot of, not wheat, but it is called the name, I forgot it in English. Anyways, oats, yes, a lot of oats that he had eaten. And sometimes, occasionally, meat and chicken if available, like poultry. So this was the normal Mediterranean diet. It was common within all Arabs, and so he used to eat that. That is the other question. Let's see another one. This was a good question. Why did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, marry Khadija ibn Khuwaylid? The answer to that is, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, became of age and he was ready to get married, she was the closest female character to him. She was his employer, actually. But she was very modest, and even though he went with her and other men and women in caravans going for trade, he did not see anything from her part that he did not like. She had many virtues, and based on those virtues, he married her. So this is a very good question. Let's see another one. Why was the age of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, why did he not die in a later age? Because we have in Quran, it states that many of the prophets lived very long lives, thousands of years. So why did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, live as much, so that he would produce as much and he would give us even more? The answer to that is that there is a set plan. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and then the infallibles after him. If the Prophet stayed, then they would either have to stay or that they would die before he dies. So it was all a set plan by God, and the Prophet in both Sunni and Shiite narrations had said, near to the time of his death, he said that I am going to die in the time period that is going to come. So he gave them this notice before he goes, so that if they had any question, anything that he needs to resolve, that they will go to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Let's try to finish the rest of the questions. There is a question that says, why didn't he have any male children? See, this returns back to the plan of God, but if we could interpret the plan a little bit, at least one piece of the spectrum, we would see that people in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not respect women the respect that they needed. So if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had a son rather than a daughter, then people would not see how much Islam cares about women. But he had a child, a small son. He died at a very young age, so that he would only have Fatima bint Muhammad, peace be upon them both. And he used to treat her with the topmost respect. Imagine that the narrations say that when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sees his daughter, he would kiss her hand. If you're an Easterner, you would know that this action is a very high action of respect. You wouldn't do that to, everybody that is around you. No, only to the people that deserve the highest of respect. And that is the way that he respected Fatima al-Zahra, peace be upon her. He respected her to that extent. And he used to say many narrations about the Sayyidah Fatima, peace be upon her. And people loved her so much because of what he said. And by loving Fatima, they would have this female figure, a female, very prominent figure, that is an example to be followed in Islam. So that is, I think, a prominent reason why he would only have female children. Last two questions. Actually, we don't have time for both, so I'll answer only one. This is an incomplete question. So let's answer the other one. Yeah. The question says that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came into people that were savages, if you want to, just take all of that description and fit it into one. They were savages. So how was he able to change them so much? The answer is actually in the narrations of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said that whenever you treat people fairly and whenever you treat them with a good heart, their hearts will be inclined towards you. So he gave us the equation. It is not something like a secret or some dark magic or whatever. It is a simple equation that is known by all people in this world. But even though we know this equation, it is very difficult to abide by it and try to stick by it. Many things have happened to the Prophet, peace be upon him, within his lifetime. They were very difficult. Even when he told them that I am a prophet and this is Islam, etc. Even his uncle, Abu Lahab, came and they took, the innards of the cattle that they slaughtered and threw it upon his back while he was praying. And he did not care, he did not retaliate, he did not fight. But the opposite happened. When Abu Lahab was sick on his deathbed, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to visit him. And even Abu Lahab asked, why are you visiting me? Are you trying to get me into Islam? I won't. See how arrogant he is. The Prophet said, no, but this is how we as Muslims act. So this sums up the lecture for this night. Thank you for attending. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa aflaha man salla ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.